This is the Flipping Junkie podcast, episode 22. Welcome to the Flipping Junkie podcast. My name is Danny Johnson, former software developer turned house flipper, flipping hundreds of houses. Each week, we bring you interviews, strategies, stories, and motivation to help you get started flipping houses and on your way to becoming your own boss and achieving financial freedom. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's get to it. All right, welcome back to the Flipping Junkie podcast. We're doing the series on foundational stuff, getting your mindset right, motivation, all that kind of good stuff to get a good start and the right start to get your real estate investing business going and growing. And today I've got Nathan Brooks on the show. He's a dad, husband, worship leader, real estate investor in Kansas City market. He's a foodie, coffee addict, and a CrossFit junkie. And Nathan is doing very well in Kansas City. He did about 60 deals last year. And today we're going to have a great show talking with him about how to figure out what you're good at and how to figure out what you're bad at. So we'll talk about with him why that's so important. And I think it's a really interesting topic and one that needs to be discussed when you're getting started in this business or growing your business so that you can always sort of have that in your mind to focus on what you should be doing and what you should not be doing and having other people do. Because as most investors probably would attest to, I know I certainly did for a long time, for many years, was doing things that really I didn't enjoy, maybe I wasn't good at, and just felt like I needed to just because I didn't feel that I wanted to take the time or wanted to get into the complexity of hiring or having other people do work for me, and it was a big mistake, stunted our growth quite a bit, and I don't want that to happen to you. So we're going to discuss that today on the show. It's going to be an awesome show. I'm looking forward to it. Nathan Brooks. And, be sure to subscribe on iTunes. We're doing this series where we're starting with foundation. They're going to move into every other aspect in sequential order, sort of like a real estate investing course, but through podcast each week. And so each week Monday we're releasing each new episode. So if you subscribe on iTunes, you'll get that automatically. And, if not, go to FlippingJunkie.com and subscribe there by email, and we'll notify you of each new episode, plus everything else like the blog posts that we do, sharing information about our business, what we're doing, and informational things like that. And you can also check out the Facebook group, facebook.com/FlippingJunkie, and all of that. And be sure to also check out the other things that we provide. We provide real estate investor websites at leadpropeller.com. You can check those out. All of my years' experience of getting thousands of leads through my own website I used to develop these websites for other real estate investors to use so that they don't have to come up with all this and learn all those things that took me years to learn. So very cool. And check out reimobile.com as well. That's our CRM system for keeping track of leads. And most of the most successful investors know that a lot of the deals are in the follow-up. And that's a system to help you keep track of your leads and do follow-up. Because most of the time you're not going to buy the deal when you first go and meet a seller. It's going to be in the follow-up. So check that out, reimobile.com. And thanks again for listening to the show. I know there's a lot of other options and choices out there for a real estate investing podcast, and I really appreciate you listening to this one, Flipping Junkie Podcast. Thanks a lot. All right, so Nathan, you there?
Yes, sir. Hey, Danny, how are you?
Oh, good. How are you doing?
I am well. Awesome day here in KC.
Great. Yeah, I really appreciate you being on the show, taking the time to share with all the Flipping Junkie listeners what you've got to share.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I really enjoy it and enjoyed our conversation as well. So,
all right, great. Well, let's find out a little bit more about you because we did talk a little bit before we started recording here, and I was itching to ask you about how you got your start and all that kind of stuff, but I didn't want you to have to repeat all that. So. Now we're recording, I can finally find out about all of that because you're doing some big things now, and just want to find out, how did you get started? What got you interested in real estate investing, and how did you end up doing as well as you're doing?
Well,
let's start with the beginning part, because we could.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for that, and thank you for having me on your show. And I also really enjoyed our conversation at the beginning here too. So, as far as the Inception Story, really, I loved kind of swinging a hammer as a boy, doing stuff around the house with my dad. I'd go and pull stuff off of construction sites around where our house was, and I built a little shed in the backyard, and so did a number of like habitat kind of houses and that sort of stuff as well, growing up through high school. And so I've always really enjoyed seeing a project come together, or understand how the renovation or rehab or whatever kind of thing works, and whether that was swinging a hammer, or putting paint on a wall or whatever. So from there, I kind of had the itch, uh, looking at people flipping houses, or people owning rental houses or whatever. And so I actually overheard a conversation of a guy in a restaurant, and a few things later, a few phone calls later, whatever, I supposedly had my first, business relationship, and I guess I did. It wasn't very good. It wasn't a couple of very good deals, and a lot of things that really ended up kind of feeding in the School of Hard Knocks lesson book, if you will. But out of that came a real drive and desire and passion to not do it incorrectly, and to get back after doing real estate stuff in a good way. So we kind of followed the crash, and really suffered some casualties and heartache through that process. But out of it came a lot of clarity and desire to do it again and do it right.
Yeah, and that's big. It just seems like, over and over, the people that actually, are making it really well and doing a lot of great things with real estate investing and changing their lives, improving their situation, everything, kind of went through those negative times, and instead of letting that sort of force them out back into some other job or situation, they looked at it as a pot, like found the benefit out of the adversity, right? So you realized that it was like where you learned all those things and decided that you couldn't do it that way. You needed to figure out a better way. And so it really, you wouldn't be here had you maybe not had those difficult times.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's exactly right. It's one of those deals where, um, you know, and even now, I mean, I'm sure in anybody's business, as every deal there's something to learn, whether it's a little nugget in on the title side, in the searching, or on the ownership side, or how to structure a lease option deal, or we just took down our first small multi in a lease option kind of creative financing way. And there's just so many ways you can structure things. And so if you're open to learning and you're open to understanding what makes deals tick, there's just so much more opportunity. And then when you have the opportunity, let's say that same multi deal, appeared 5 years ago, I might not have really understood how to structure it. But because we'd done, this deal and that deal and this deal, and had this conversation with guys like yourself, we really could understand how to attack it, and take down the proverbial elephant. So
Yeah, that's great. So what we wanted to talk about today was, figuring out what you're good at and what you're not so good at. And to start that, what I wanted to do was kind of, ask what you feel is so important about knowing what you're good and bad at, when it comes to all the different things that you find yourself doing when you get started in this business, or as you go from doing a deal here and there to growing the business. So it doesn't necessarily pertain to just people that are getting started, but also people that are maybe just doing this as a side business, or slowly growing it.
right. Well, I think so. I think that is the question to ask. And I think there's a couple of things to look at that question. So first of all, when you're starting, and so like for me, for instance, I was always really able to find deals and put together deals. So I was definitely good at that idea, that avenue. So in our business now, I'm really the person that is cultivating those relationships, cultivating deals. We work with clients all over the country on turnkey properties and wholesale deals, etc. So that's really a strength for me. And then, I this in 2015, a partner and I came together and really were able to discover that very quickly we were able to run much faster together. And his strengths came in the fashion of, really from an organizational standpoint, from a digging deeper into numbers, digging more into a systems side. And so I think, and those are definitely not my strengths. And so it's not to say, so if you're the person sitting out there saying, I'm looking at my first deal or two or three or whatever it is, and we've all sat there, believe me.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and so to say that I have to be good at all these things, you certainly don't. And there's no way for you to learn them without either having a mentor, coach, whatever, there with you doing them exactly at that same time, or you're just jumping in like myself, where I just kind of jumped into deals and learned on the fly, and that's fine too. And I think when you look at those things that you're good at and bad at, and if you're able to say, I'm really good at this thing, but I have to be aware of this thing over here that I'm not as good at, you're at least aware and honest with yourself about it. So, if it's bookkeeping, maybe you go ahead and reach out to a virtual assistant, or your accountant who already deals with the other stuff, and it might cost you a few bucks, but you have it already built in. Or you know if it's understanding how to comp out a house, then you call up the person who's doing exactly what you want to do or more, and find that person, or an appraiser that'll do desktop appraisals or things like that, where you can really actively put those pieces into play, even if you're paying per deal. So it costs you a couple $100, but you know that the comps are or exactly where you expected. I actually had the same exact conversation yesterday with a client in Texas, and he was looking at deals and trying to make sure he had all of his pieces of the puzzle. And so you don't have to pretend that you can do all those things. You just have to make sure you're aware of all those things, and you put people in place to do them.
Right. And I think something that I know I fell into, and a lot of other investors fall into, is thinking that, well, I learned how to do it because I had to out of necessity, and I have my process in place, and I think I'm going to do it better than anybody else that I could train and do it, because they're not going to care as much as me. But the problem is, like, you're not going to do it as well as somebody that's focused on just doing that. You know what I mean? Because you're trying to do 10 different things at once, and something's going to get dropped. You're not going to juggle all of those things all the time without dropping,
Yeah, that's
bills.
100% right. It's 100% right. And it's a really different question when you're saying, okay, well, I'm going to do one deal. I'm going to buy it, whether I'm the realtor, the agent, buy off market, whatever. And then I'm going to go and rehab it myself. And then I'm going to lease it myself. So if you're doing one task at a time yourself, and that's your style and model, great. And I know a number of guys who are really successful who do that. But I know, for instance, in my business, we might have, 5 or 10 rehabs going at the same time. And so clearly, to handle all the balls in the air and all the different little fires and big fires, and leasing and maintenance and rehab crews, and books and all that stuff, and not to mention just getting them to close and getting them to marketing, or photographs or whatever, all of a sudden you got to say, holy cow, there's all this stuff that I have to do, and I cannot, like you said, I cannot do them all. I'm going to drop the ball on something if I don't start handing off work for other people.
Yeah, and everything falls apart, and then you're going, man, what happened? But so, how do you have a system, or how to find out like what your strengths are, and maybe what you like doing, or what you should be doing versus what you shouldn't be? I mean, is there some sort of process or something that you think is good for people to try to go through?
Well, I think the number one thing when you sit down at your desk and you look at the pile of stuff, if there is one on your desk, there's a pretty clear indicator of what you're not interested or good at doing.
That's a good
uh,
point.
so if there's a pile of papers and you're, whatever, you like me, I hate putting away all the stuff, as far as scanning documents and putting them in or whatever. So, I have people who help me do that. And I love, looking at deals, and I have great systems in place and of tracking them and looking at them. So at one point we found ourselves where we had more deals to write and more offers and properties to look at than what I could actually physically get to. So I might go look at 10 houses, but then I didn't have the energy, time, stamina, whatever, to go write them. And so, we had to have people who could do that. And so for me, you have to say, well, what do I really love to do? So if I could do one or two or three things today, what do I love doing? And for me, I love looking at houses, I love finding houses, and I love buying and selling houses. And so, if I'm in the right spot doing the right thing, and this is totally a Jim Collins, Good to Great, the book. This is kind of a chapter right out of that, which is, everybody on the bus going the same direction, doing the same thing. So, I think if you can look at yourself honestly and ask those questions, and you'll be much further ahead than somebody who has not been honest with themselves.
Right. So it'd just be kind of like looking at everything that you're doing and saying, should I be doing this or should I not? Some people use the whole formula for determining sort of how much you feel your time is worth.
Mm-hmm.
And then thinking in terms of, could I get somebody to do it for less? Would it cost me less to have somebody else do this? I mean, how do you feel about that, using that formula?
Absolutely use that in my own life and business, and absolutely squarely believe that that's a great way to look at it. I think sometimes it takes a little time to get there, so that might not be the first thing you ask, or it might be. So, if you're somebody who's trying to, you want to make $100 an hour, and your time is worth $100 an hour, and if you execute X number of deals in this amount of time, then in you're $100 an hour, so you're that's a if you ballpark the 40-hour week kind of person, you're working 40 hours a week. That's $200,000 a year. That's pretty darn good living, right? So, obviously, scanning in documents, like I hate doing it in my office here, I'm sure I can find somebody for less than $100 an hour to scan documents.
Right. And so some people still hesitate to do it because of different things, like thinking, well, I'd have to train them. I'd have to, bring them on and figure out how to compensate them when this isn't something that, I could really have somebody doing full time. To that, what do you say to something like that? If you realize that you shouldn't be doing some of these things, but then you also don't have enough to give people to do, to keep them busy. Is there something where it may be a good way to hire somebody part-time?
Absolutely. I think part-time virtual assistant, friend, neighbor, brother, like my brother, and we come and hang out, about once a week, and he helps me do a lot of the scanning stuff and shredding stuff and whatever. And so it's like fun hangout time with my brother, but it's also, get stuff knocked out for me. It makes a few bucks for him. Everybody's happy. So I love that. We have people who work for us now that are full time, and we have people who work for us that are part time. And I think honestly, the biggest barrier is your own mind and your own ego kind of in the way. And if the end result that you want is you want to do everything, then obviously that's what you're going to do, and then you'll have the consequences of having all the responsibility. So you don't have to have a system in place. You don't have to have a organized process. You could do it, whatever way you want, because it's only you have to look at. But I think, and what I've personally found to be true, is it's pretty painful at the beginning when you bring somebody on, because you're paying for them to be there, and they're blankly looking at you, and you have to figure out how to explain what's in your mind and what you've done, probably subconsciously at this point, without, and perhaps, like in my case, trying to understand, how do I get from the place that it's in my brain and something that I need and is a pain point to cover, to a system and a task list and an order of things or whatever, to this person.
Right.
So, and that's where my business partner has been really useful too, is kind of he's helped really in that, through that process of saying, here's all the things. And I've gotten better and better about being able to be on the front end of that and say, all right, well, here's these 20 things I'm looking for you to do. Let's create a task sheet. Let's create an order of operation, and then let's talk through it. And there is a heavy amount of time that's involved with that kind of process on the front end, but you could either continue doing that same operation over and over and over and over again yourself, or you could do the operation, slow it down a little bit, refine it a little bit. This also makes you better at that because now you understand it. Because if you can teach it to somebody, obviously, then you have more clarity for yourself. And then the second caveat to that, of course, is having somebody who is also willing, able, and good at doing what you want them to do, right? So,
Right.
If you hire the wrong person who wants to create, graphic design all day long and post on Facebook, and you've tasked them to be your, office manager, organizer, that type of person, you probably have hired the wrong person for the job.
Yeah, you made two very big points, I think, that need reiteration. So the first one was, that in the process of explaining what to do and how to do it, you become much more clear on the process. Whereas you might think you have a good idea of how things are done, but as you explain to somebody else, you realize that you even have gaps in how best to do something. Or maybe you weren't doing something so efficiently, and you realize that when you have to explain it to somebody else, and you see it sort of from an elevated standpoint. And that's just super incredible. And so even if you aren't hiring other people, maybe you should be writing down processes and act as though you are explaining it to somebody else for everything that you're doing, so that you can have the benefit of that.
Yes, and I tell you what, I had a really wonderful conference call with a gentleman named Mark out of Chicago, who's a property manager, investor, and he gave. I wish I could claim the idea, but he had the idea with his staff and himself. They started doing all these. They called them one pagers, and we actually call them exactly that in our business as well. And so every time so for instance, let's say I send an email to my transaction coordinator that says these are the 10 steps we do on MLS transactions, and these are the 10 steps we do on a turnkey, non-MLS transaction. Well, guess what? I just created a one pager via email. And if I just remember to copy and paste that email doc, and I'm an Evernote junkie, so we have a systems notebook in Evernote, and guess what? Copy and paste. Here's now the process for the sell side of a turnkey property. Bam, put it into a one pager, and now anytime I would need to share that information, refine that information, find that information, it's searchable, it's forwardable, it's shareable, and most of all, it's written down as a process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a good point. Sometimes people don't realize that maybe they're creating those documents in an email or something and don't think in terms of, saving that as the process and just forgetting about it. And I'm sure I have tons of notes on old computers and stuff like that I've written down and just kind of forgotten about. Which is, I should go back and look at a lot of those, because maybe some of the things I had thought through at the time or learned that I had forgotten, as time went on. But so the other point, though, was that I felt like should be reiterated about what you talked about was having the right people, to do the jobs that you want them to do. And you talked about the person that maybe is more interested in being online doing graphic design stuff or something when you have them doing something else. And some people might let that sort of slip past them and not pick up on how important that is, because, their ability to take what you tell them to do and improve on it or get excited about it all has to do with what interests them to begin with. And so it's not just getting anybody that's willing to do work for you at a certain price, because it's more about having the right person there doing the things so that you don't get frustrated and don't have the work done correctly, where they make mistakes and stuff because they're just not interested, then you get rid of them and end up doing everything yourself and not want to hire somebody else because you've had that bad experience and feel like it's always going to be that way.
Right, exactly. That's exactly right. In most of the time, in that experience, if you did that and you had that experience, it was more likely to do that it was your fault.
Yeah. Yep.
And I mean, I own that for myself. That that's absolutely, uh, you have to own that and say, okay, well, how did I do that? How did I miss? Um, and then how do I make sure that this next time, that we really think about this process. And I wish I could remember. I'm sure in the show notes we can go back and look later. But there was a great Timothy Ferriss podcast within the last few. I want to say it's a month or so, and he interviewed a tech guy where they talked about how they do their interviews and in the process, and it really got me thinking because they have these pretty intensive, multiple phone calls for just pre-screening, and then they have days and days and days of actual kind of boots on the ground, interviews and solving problems and working with their team members, and so you get to really get a sense and feel for the person. And it really got me thinking, whether it's a maintenance guy or it's a office person or if it's a salesperson or whatever. So if in my business, I am fully confident that in the future we're not just going to hire somebody. We're going to have, whether it's an afternoon, late afternoons, evenings, or weekends or whatever, they will be doing stuff with us, me, office person, property manager, whoever, before they are fully hired, just so that we know that they might be just the most wonderful person, but they're still not a great fit with your team, and that's okay. And so rather than making a hire and then having to fire, which is super costly, frustrating, painful, awful, do it slowly enough that that you're really getting the right person for that. And so I love that podcast, and it really, really hit home for me.
Yeah, I'll have to figure out which one that was so we can put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's super important. And, to learn that from the get-go before you make those mistakes that we all make, could save you so much time and energy. And look at that in a different way from, the people that, because so many of us do that, where we have that bad experience and then you never give it a shot again. And it reminds me of, we've been talking a lot in our businesses to grow our companies, about core values and things like that. And we talked to a business owner here in San Antonio that does it's a completely different industry. But one of theirs was forgiveness. And when I saw it, I said, forgiveness, I wonder why that's one of their core values. And on the face of it, you think, well, you need to just forgive people. But whenever I talk to them about it, the reasoning and what they talk to each other about and share for, regarding that core value is that if somebody on the team makes a mistake and other people aren't willing to forgive that person, they might just go around them and complain, oh, they screwed that up, and then start going around them and just kind of avoiding them from then on. And when it's very unhealthy, because then you have all the politics and all this other stuff and people talking about other people and just not working together. Whereas if you have forgiveness as a core value, then everybody's willing to forgive and work on and help that person improve to help everybody improve. And so it's huge. And,
that's really interesting. What business were they in, if you don't mind?
Well, it's protective coatings. It's just a manufacturing sort of thing. So
that's incredible. I love that so much, and I love it so much because it's such an important reminder. Because there's always things that aren't quite right, whether it's just missing a phone call or an email or whatever, and into obviously much bigger things if people really screwed up something. And I think it is, if you're honest with yourself, there's always things that you can do better, or that you screw up, or that you wish you would have done differently. And so not only are you probably forgiving yourself in some cases, but you're also willing to forgive other people, and instilling that willingness, necessity to forgive, which also then says we have open dialogue about what happened, which also says we will figure out how to not do that again. And to tie that back in, so in process 1, 2, 3, we missed this one thing, and and now you go into your one pager,
Right. Yeah. Instead of just, yeah, because then like you said, you open the dialogue and you guys can improve the process.
Yep.
Instead, if you just got frustrated and said they're messing everything up, and, you don't talk about that, maybe they're not following it, and you don't get to the root of the problem.
Yep.
And we can go all the way down this rabbit hole with all kinds of talk and discussion, because it is pretty important. And it reminds me of, I think, I forgot his name, but the guy that started Zappos and their whole customer service orientation, like how it's so big to them, like the customer experience.
Yes. Yes,
And,
exactly.
and in their book, though, like he was talking about how they have it set up where somebody comes to them, or somebody has a problem, they come to a higher up and they say, hey, we have this problem. And, the question to be asked is why? Why did that problem happen? And so an example, I think, was, somebody dropped the ball. Well, why did they drop the ball? Because the training's not set up to keep them from dropping the ball. And, you keep asking why. And I think you go like 5 or 6 deep and you find the real cause. Because a lot of times people just ask the first why and then jump to a conclusion that that's the problem and try to correct it, when it's actually more layers deep.
Yep, exactly.
But anyway, yeah, that's something important, as you, or because I'm learning so much right now with dealing with people and working with people to help all get aligned and have clarity in what we're trying to accomplish. And so how many people, if you don't mind my asking, do you guys have working together in your real estate investing business?
I would say we have a core group of, let me think, 1, 2, 3, 4, probably a core group of 5, 6, 7 people. And then on the next circle would be, the subcontract/contractors that we work with on a regular basis would probably be another 10 to 15. And that would include, from appraisers to inspectors to a number of contractors, professional photographers, transaction coordinator, you know so we've had a discussion internally where we would rather have a really awesome business with people who are really happy doing a fun job that's interesting and doing cool stuff, right? So flipping houses and making great houses for tenants and making great values and investments for clients of ours, turnkey or whatever, selling wholesale deals to local guys here. All that stuff is fun. It's awesome. And then, how can we take that process and that all the stuff that we need to do and divvy it up so everybody has understanding of what their responsibilities are. So like, for instance, right now, our property manager's rock star. She's amazing. But she's getting killed with the amount of workload. And so we're like, you know what? We're going to find her an assistant. And so even though it costs some money to do that, we know that we can free up and re-leverage her time to the things that are, again, what is her dollar value worth, or whatever, what is her time best, most well spent.
Right. Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah, because you're thinking in terms of, well, you brought somebody to help you with those things for your business, and they're working on that. But sometimes the people that you bring on end up needing help, and you've got to really, be open to seeing that and being aware of that would help them. And maybe one person is not enough for certain things inside of your business as you grow it. So I'm sure that you've, how long did you spend like doing most everything yourself before you started growing and bringing people on to help you out?
Quite a few years. I mean, I've done it for quite a few years by myself. And in varying degrees of, the circle of people, whether that would be, still the appraisers and contractors and stuff, but I was hiring
Right.
it all out. I was running it myself. I was doing all that stuff myself. And so at some point when you kind of want to have a breakthrough, you want to kind of have a growth edge opportunity, whatever, you have to have those pieces in place. Otherwise, A, you're going to lose your mind
Yeah.
because you just can't do it all. B, you're going to get burned out and hate it, and then you're going to drop the ball and you're going to screw something up or miss something or right now, I'm focused. I don't want to miss opportunity. So if I'm dealing with writing contracts, which I don't particularly like doing, that I could hand off to somebody who's amazing at it, and then I spent that hour, I could probably go find another deal, which then puts in the system, which gives all our people another, awesome property to, flip, rent, lease, whatever, sell. So by making the conscious choice of saying no to something and handing it off, I'm actually enabling myself to do something that I like doing better, or frees me up for an hour to do something else, or leverage my time in a way that I can really benefit my company to what I'm best at.
Yeah, and that's huge because really, maybe too many times a lot of us are looking to the future. Like, I'm going to put in all this hard work now so that I can, have the freedom and enjoy everything in the future. And sometimes if you're not thinking in terms of how do you do what you just suggested or live and focus on working towards what you just suggested, that future date keeps getting pushed back further and further. Even though you're making progress, you're growing things. But if it's almost like realizing that you could really have that right now or a lot sooner than you think, as long as you plan to sort of set it up that way.
Boy, that I mean that you just hit it on nail on the head. So, and this is definitely a struggle. I think for anybody who has that um, the self drive motivation to do something. There are some people that love working for a company and for an individual or whatever. There are some people who I always said I was not a very good employee.
Yeah.
I I like being able to call the shots, figure it out, and be dynamic. And a lot of times in a situation where I see something wrong within a company or whatever, I don't have the power to make that change. And I know my business partner and I on many occasions were like, nope, we're not doing that again. And then problem is solved because we can make that decision right then and there. Um, and so, I think that the other thing with that too is saying, all right, well, finding the balance of somebody like you or me, or there's so many guys out there who are going after whatever their dream is, and you're willing to put in the hours and whatever, but finding a balance between saying, okay, I'm going to work I'm not going to work 100 hours a week at the
Right.
sacrifice of my fun or my playing with my children or my date nights with my wife. And believe me, I'm preaching to the choir right now because, it's definitely something that I struggle with too.
Yeah, we all do. I mean, and it's just one of those things. It's you don't work out once, get fit, and you never have to work out again. It's something everybody's constantly working at, and you sort of build that into like the way you are, through work and making it a habit, and that's how you achieve that. But it's always something that you're going to be working on. But
Yep,
yeah,
absolutely.
so this has been great. I think we've had great discussion about seeing things to be aware of and ideas for how to look at growing a real estate investing business to where it's not building yourself into a job. And most of us spend a lot of time getting into the business, doing everything ourselves, and that's necessary to a point to where you sort of need to figure out how everything should run before you can have somebody else do things for you. But I think the goal should be to quickly move past that, and it's something I wish I would have done more and faster as I got into the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the more self-realization and more introspection, being willing to look back at yourself, the more able you are to be able to recognize those things and name those things, and the comfort to be able to say, it's okay if I need to change this. And some people deal really well with change, and some people don't. And I think it's always good to have people who surround you who are also able to share with you that, man, this is awesome, or man, this is really stupid. We should, we should figure out what's not working here and fix it.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's powerful.
Yep.
Yeah, and so what I like to ask a guest on the show, because I know a lot of us are overachievers and typically reading more than one or two books at a time. Are there several books or any books or podcasts or anything that you're reading right now, listening to, and really enjoying that you'd like to share with everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. I am actually waiting to dig into a book called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, I believe is his name. Heard him through a Tim Ferriss podcast. Again, I'm a pretty big Tim Ferriss junkie, so I pretty much don't miss an episode of his podcast. They have just really interesting guys on there, and super smart people. So this guy was a Navy SEAL, and got out of the SEALs, and really started some business enterprises. And actually, the other book that I am also in the midst of reading is called Team of Teams by Stanley McChrystal, who also was a military guy. Not really, I'm into that kind of stuff, but just happens that both of those were ones that really caught my attention. But I also just ran across a new podcast called Radio Lab, and really enjoyed how they do their media and tell stories and stuff. So anything I'm usually reading, I'm reading that's it's either history, it's some sort of Navy SEAL or special operations related, or it's something to do with real estate. So I'm kind of boring, I guess, in that respect.
So does your wife ask you why you don't ever read fiction books? Because I used to read fiction books, I think, before I got into business, into real estate investing. And then since then, I don't know that I've read too many, if any at all. And
yeah, she, of course, my wife is an avid reader as well, but not so much into necessarily the same ones I am. And even like my folks and family, most of them love sci-fi and that kind of stuff. And I don't know, growing up and professionally, I've also been a professional musician for a long time, and so I don't know from a creative standpoint if that kind of was able to give that creative energy, or if I enjoyed putting deals together and that fed the creative side. I'm not sure, but I get a lot more. I have a lot more fun. Even like TV shows, I'm not really into, sitcoms or anything like that. I like watching, like, some history show on, how they, built a bridge or something, that I get to, see what they did, and not just something that, was made up.
yeah, I'm the same way. It's like learning something. Like you can get something out of it that you can. Yeah, it's just fascinating. Have you, since you were interested in a lot of these, guys that wrote these books that were Navy SEALs and stuff, have you heard of Mark Devine's Unbeatable Mind?
No, I have not. I will look forward to adding that to my list, though.
Yeah, it's an awesome book, and he's the founder of SEAL Fit, and
yeah,
it's just a great book. It's a good read, so check that one out too. And I'll put everything that you mentioned: Tim Ferriss podcast, Radio Lab podcast, Extreme Ownership, and Team of Teams in the show notes page, which is going to be at flippingjunkie.com/22. So flippingjunkie.com/22 is where you can get some show notes from this episode, and then the links to the podcasts and the books that were just mentioned. And then Nathan, is there a place where people can reach you, that they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. They can go to Bridge, BridgeQuity.com. So it's Bridge Equity, just one E.com. Our tagline now is "There's only one E in Bridge Equity."
It's a good thing you said that, because I might have put the wrong one in the notes page.
So yeah, you can connect for both the property management and turnkey kind of stuff there, as well as email. And contact for info there. So yeah, that'd be great.
All right, fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show with me, and glad to get to know you better. And I'm sure we'll keep in touch. And
Likewise, Danny, I really enjoyed it as well, and thank you again for the opportunity to be on with you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Well, have a good day.
You too.
All right. All right, fantastic show today. Nathan shared a lot of great information, and I hope that you got some great tips out of that and some things to keep in mind as you grow your business and get started in the real estate investing and growing your business and all of those things. So a lot of stuff that I wish I had learned and focused on back in the early days, but it's never too late. It's good that we're looking at what we're doing and what we've done and always trying to improve. That's the key, always trying to improve. So there's in one of Jim Rohn's books, he talks about a guy that's talking about how much he should be being paid because of his experience, saying, I've got 10 years experience. And Jim Rohn says, well, what the guy really had was 1 year of experience repeated 10 times. So you sort of learned and gained the experience over that 1 year, but for the next 9 years was just like staying the same, not really learning anymore, just kind of going through the motions. So it's not really 10 years experience, it's more of 1 year experience repeated over and over. And I hope that you take that to heart and always keep educating yourself. And you're already doing that by listening to the podcast, so I applaud you for that. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and check out the coming episodes. We're going to have, I think it's 2 episodes from now, have Hal Elrod, author of Miracle Morning. It's an awesome book and great episode with him, interview with him. Really looking forward to having that release. So be sure to subscribe on iTunes and check out the podcast each week. See you next week.